Firstly, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and we can't fathom a conversation on co-designing with nature without acknowledging that deep connection to land, sea, sky and community, and that co-design and sustainability has been happening for at least 65,000 years on these lands. And I'm really excited today that we will continue on the conversation that Mick has started this morning. And I want to pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge all First Nations people joining us in the room today. Co-designing with nature, we're actually talking today about when nature meets technology and we start the next industrial revolution. So when we look at the natural world, we notice that everything operates in a system. It's interconnected. It's not this separate silos where we can kind of view things as individual entities. It all happens together in one ecosystem. And these ecosystems are a barometer for the health of the planet as well as our own health. And so, we can use this blueprint in nature to shift our systems and way of thinking from being exploitative to generative. And the conversation we're going to have this morning will be looking deeply into healthcare and environmental aspects of this equation. And I'm really excited to hear from these four incredible people on the panel this morning who, by the end of this, you're all going to be fighting each other to go and have a chat with them, and you're going to have so many questions, but lucky me, I get to go first. So I really want to start with, I think, you, Liz. What problem is it that you're addressing, and can you give us a sense of how this is currently being solved in the industry that Hemedine is operating in?
Yeah, so in healthcare, we're facing rising healthcare costs, an aged population crisis. So in Australia, by 2050, a quarter of us will be over 50 years old. And 1 in 3 of us will suffer from disabling hearing loss. So our ears are a bit like a car, bear with me, and they're mechanical. So it's all about movement. And over time, that gets fatigued and damaged. And that damage is irreversible. So the only way to treat that damage is with a cochlear implant. But less than 3% of those who should have that treatment have received it. So the cochlear implant, breakthrough technology, invented 40 years ago. It was its own kind of industrial revolution for hearing. But it's trying to treat a mechanical system with digital methods. And what that means is that it kind of ignores a lot of the processes that were put in place by nature to help us hear really well. And so there's limited information that gets to the brain in terms of that hearing chain, and that means there's limited performance, particularly in noisy environments. So great when I'm here and you're all quiet and I can hear everything, but in social situations, the workplace, incredibly tough. And the other disadvantage is they do have rather large external components, so it's highly visible, and that's another thing to put people off getting this treatment. So as an industry, we've been stuck at that 3% for decades. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to add to the burden of healthcare that we're already starting to see, because untreated hearing loss is linked to horrendous diseases like dementia, heart failure, depression, to name but a few. So hearing loss doesn't seem like it's life-threatening, but it certainly affects your quality of life, and it does lead to life-threatening issues. So at Hemedine, we're asking nature, what should we build, rather than trying to tell nature, you have to adapt to what we're building.
Yeah, I really like that way of thinking. Lewis, Meanne's also in the healthcare space. Can you tell us a bit about the problem that you guys are addressing and how what the current sort of status quo for your field is?
Well, we are actually focusing on the stream of that spectrum in life, early births. So essentially there are nearly 14 million preterm babies born every year, 26,000 in Australia. That poses a big expenditure for the health system, but more importantly, poses a big problem in the sense that we need to provide a support for these preterm babies. Despite, different to the full-term babies that they have human breast milk, these babies doesn't have a solution to maintain and support and nourish them. Essentially, why? Because they're supposed to be in with mom still. So there is not a current solution. What the clinicians have done so far, and it's the best that they can do, is to combine human breast milk with a little bit of fortification that came from different sources. For example, cow milk. However, that's not nearly a good enough solution for these preterm babies, and also is associated with long-term consequences in their health and health outcomes. So what essentially we are doing in the company is that we are bringing together what we understand in terms of the science and also what is offered by nature in the form of human breast milk, and try to create a product that is perfectly tailored for the needs of the baby. It's trying to bring that magic of human breast milk, all these benefits that are associated with the consumption of human breast milk, and designed a perfect formulation that support these babies and help them to have a better start in life.
Thank you. And so, Alex, I want to ask you about farming and food production and the area that LEAF's working in. What problems specifically is LEAF addressing, and what's currently happening in your field that perhaps needs a bit of a mindset shift?
Yeah, so I think in general, when we look at food production, we talk about population. So today we have population of about 7 billion people, and we're going to have about almost 10 billion people by 2050. So in this space of 30 years, we need to increase our food production significantly. And also we have many challenges at the moment with climate change, with the change of arable land declining to be used for other purposes. So I think we know that we need to produce more food per meter square of land. And we had a big agricultural revolution with fertilizers, crop protections products. But if we just keep going in that direction, we will be hurting the environment. And the increase of yield that we can achieve through that technology is also looks like it's already plateau. So we need something else. So for us, we look at what do plants need. Plants need nutrition, water, and sunlight. And that's one thing, the sunlight, that we feel it hasn't been touched yet on how it can be improved. So we make a material that simply optimizes the wavelength of sunlight into a light that is more beneficial for the plant to grow. So we work with the nature. The sunlight will always be there, getting a bit too much in some places. But we want to empower, engineer that to increase the crop productivity.
And Mike, Rainstick, you're also working in this field. Can you tell us a bit about the problems that you guys are addressing, and how that differs to what's currently happening in your industry?
Yeah, I think Alex points out a lot of really good key challenges there. I think one of the things that we also have to consider is that in the EU, there's legislation that will be passed to ban 50% of pesticides and 20% of fertilizers. So even if we did want to continue using the same way that we always have, that's changing, whether farmers are ready for it or not. And I'm not sure if people have seen some of the global events that have happened where there's been riots, or there's been massive economic unrest over these major changes that have been applied without any consideration to how do we get there, how do we change, and part of that is, in our opinion, we've looked at those three things. We've looked at the sunlight, we've looked at the water, we've looked at the land, but we've actually missed one of those levers. And that's what Rainstick comes in and does. And that's working with the electrical environment in the atmosphere and how that influences how plants and fungi grow.
So I want to hear from each of you in a minute about what it is that you're actually doing. But my first question to you collectively is, why is turning to nature-inspired solutions, in your view, the answer? Like, why is that so important? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I can start. I think by working with nature, because everything that we do, if we talk about technology, we try to change something. But there's a way to look at it, what's going to happen in the next 5 years, 10 years, and there's a way to look at it when time is equals to infinity. And everything that we do from before, whenever we do something, it's not always just positive. There's also negative impacts of what we're doing. I think by working with nature, we can reduce that risk of what we do today to have the negative impact in the future that we may not be able to model or even think about today.
In our case, especially for health, nature has the advantage of testing solutions over so many generations.
Yeah.
So we are saving us time by building up on what nature has achieved with evolution and testing so many times and get a better solution. So definitely they set a perfect start for us to just get fine-tune the solution to what we are trying to solve.
Yeah, I think nature does it best, so we should be inspired by it. And the fact that we're advancing technologies, we can make things on the nanoscale. So there's a moment in time where we'll be able to replicate what nature does and the structures. I'm thinking about the hair cells in the ear. We're already looking at trying to replicate those. So at some point, our technology will catch up with being able to be closer to nature.
Our origin story is in nature, very much so. So shout out to my co-founder Daryl over there. His mob, the Maraweli people, they used a chugara, which was their ceremonial stick that they used to in rain dance and encouraging thunderstorms to an area, because they knew and they observed that when a thunderstorm came through an area that things would germinate, things would grow. And if you look at other cultures around the world, like in Japan, there'd be like a medicine man who would sit on top of the hill and watch where the lightning strikes would be, and then come down to those places weeks later, and that's where the most potent medicinal mushrooms would be. And you go, okay, well, that's all great. Well, if Chris, who works on our team, he had the largest organic mushroom farm in Australia, and they have these little button mushrooms. Button mushrooms are the same as the white cap mushrooms, by the way, and they grow them indoors.
Yeah.
And a thunderstorm would come over, and those little button mushrooms would quickly grow overnight, and they become white cap mushrooms, which super sucks for the farmer because it's $4 less a kilo that they get. But there's these things now. If you said, okay, well, the thunderstorm is rain or it's nitrogen, well, then why did it do that indoors? And so until you start looking at what's happening and exploring what nature is naturally evolved to do over many millions of years, we can't start that conversation with nature to be able to even understand and improve on what the established processes are.
So I want to deep dive a little bit more into the technology and introducing your businesses, who it is that you're working with, your customers, and who are you helping. So Liz, it'd be great maybe if you can tell us a little bit about Hemedina and what is it that you actually do?
Yeah, so we're quite lucky. We're actually starting from scratch, rethinking what a cochlear implant looks like and how it works. So as I said, we are trying to mimic the natural hearing system as closely as possible. So the mechanics of it, but also how it transmits information to the brain. And so what we did is we found a much simpler system, because our ears are incredibly complicated. And so there's an insect, the New Zealand tree weta, which is the name, Hemedina is the Latin name, hence why we call the company that. And it's basically a simplified version of the human ear. So we were able to take that as an inspiration and mimic that mechanically, and then also be able to retain a lot more of the information that's needed for the brain and put that into the signals that we send to the brain. And then the other aspect we're doing is, well, if we're going to mimic how the ear works, we should also consider the actual structures of the ear. So it's like a fingerprint, our outer ear. It's unique to all of us, and it helps us reduce background noise and focus in on what we want to hear. So we were like, well, the structure's built for us, let's use that structure to house our device. That did mean we had to develop our own very miniature wireless power and data transfer, so that was a big bottleneck, but we've got there. And essentially now we can place our device in the ear. So I do have a prototype that none of you can see, it's that small. But yeah, so this is the ear canal, so we place our sound processor in there with our wireless coils, and that means that we now have a very discrete device with just the batteries located behind the ear. And so, knocking down a barrier around what these devices look like, but also there's, the added bonus that we can reduce the clinical risk, because our implant now sits just behind the ear canal, so we're protected by a nice bone behind our ear. And so we can also, reduce clinical risk. So we're taking every aspect of the ear that we can and putting it into our device to get us to a better solution, improving hearing performance, knocking down barriers, getting uptake.
Great. And Lewis?
Well, I was very excited with the idea of participating of this panel because essentially describe how we approach the problem, which is by co-designing with nature. So as I mentioned before, nature has prototyped our product over dozens of years, and we are just perfecting that one. And the way we do it is essentially capturing the process of lactation and doing the changes in that process that render a different formulation that give all the nutrition for the preterm babies. So essentially they are the people we want to help, and the way to do it will be to taking human breast milk and making the changes in the composition that will fulfill the requirements. We are very close to the medical community, and that's something very important for us is actually have clarity about what we need to achieve in terms of our product in order to give them the best nutrition. So essentially the company is developing these nutritional interventions for the preterm babies.
Yeah. And so we've got Alex harnessing sunlight, Mike's harnessing lightning. Can you give us some more context into what Leaf's actually doing and who are you working with? Do you have any trials going, customer base? What's your story?
Yeah, sure. So LEAF stands for luminescent light emitting agriculture film. So as we know, most plants, they have the leaves, the color is green. That's because they are reflecting green light, which what we see. So that means the color green from the sunlight is they use it, but they don't use it in the optimal manner. So what we do is we make this material, so our product looks a bit red. So if you guys seen vertical farming, the LED companies, they have developed that they know plants need more red, purple lights than the other lights. So what we make with this material is we absorb the green light from sunlight and we re-emit it in a red light. So we're giving more red or purples or other far red lights that is more beneficial for the plant to grow. So we are spin-off from University of New South Wales, where we develop the material. And at the moment we've been doing trials with CRC Future Fruit, including the Department of Primary Industry, New South Wales, and Western Sydney University. And we've been consistently getting increased yield in the region of about 15 to 25%. And that's really significant because, and we do it in a state-of-the-art glass house, greenhouse facility. And that's significant because in that kind of environment, if you improve the water, nutrition, temperature, you're looking at a single-digit growth. So double-digit growth is really significant. And because our technology can be put retrofitted like that, it's almost zero operational costs. And at the moment we are selling to some we're doing some trials in Australia, as well as in Europe and in the Middle East region that have a lot of sunlight and where glasshouse is a big industry. So another interesting way is because 1 in 8 people today still go into hungry before they at the end of the day. So we need to produce food more locally to where the needs are. So with our technology, what is also interesting is a lot of seeds, for example, like strawberries, is really developed in Europe, but those seeds are not suitable to be grown in tropical countries. Using our technology, we've done this trial that a strawberry can grow in a tropical area in Indonesia so that it's produced in the tropical countries by changing the light.
And Mike, so Rainstick, you're combining traditional knowledge systems with Western scientific tools and perspectives. Can you tell us a little bit about your technology, what you're working on, and where you're at, who are your collaborators at the moment? Yeah,
so you thought I was going to grab the lightning machine, did you?
I was getting excited.
Everyone else had props. No, I can't bring a lightning machine. We have multiple paths because we are a platform technology. Like, it's one of the levers that hasn't been pulled before to consider the electrical environment and how that epigenetically can influence certain traits in plants and fungi. So we started out with some targets. So what would be a critical, like, shut up and take my money moment moment for the mushroom industry was 8%. We're at about 20 to 24% increase in yield. And then we're like, okay, well, what about the wheat industry? I mean, 50% of people eat rice, 35% of people eat in the world eat wheat. And for every degree hotter that the planet gets, you get 10% less wheat yield. So that seems like a pretty good time to look at that. We looked at the early vigor, which is the first leaf length, and our target was to hit 100% early vigor, and we're at around about 60% at the moment. What does that mean at the end of the day? If you can get to that 100%, that's a 19% increase in overall wheat yield. And we look at, the industry spends billions on 1% and 2% increases. So these are critical changes, and they go in addition to other innovations in the spaces that we're already knowing to add that little bit extra, considerable extra boost. We're working with Smallhold, which is a US, the second largest exotic mushroom producer in the US, as an early trial. We want to do some grain trials here in Australia. We know that's a longer thing. People want to see trials over longer periods of time, but there's been a really strong interest in Singapore because they've got this mandate, 30 by 2030, 30% of the produce by 2030. They're at 4%. It's not that much longer to go, guys. And how are they going to do things like that? And for us, rice monocot, wheat monocot, there's a lot of similarities there that we can use our technology for and do those trials. I think we sit in an interesting space because we're doing research and development, but we're also very much a commercial company, and it's about actually listening to what are the real challenges, what is the actual variety that you're going for. Is it really yield, or is it the fact that the soil's salty, or is it some other kind of aspect of it that these other nations around the world might be challenged with? Like, why should developing nations have to go through all of the same mistakes and challenges that we've gone through that we're now regulating? And how will they even keep up if we go and put regulations and say you can't use any of those tools anymore? How are they going to even supply to the other nations around the world if we don't provide a clean alternative to that? And so I should also add on there that because everyone's like, what is it? They're imagining some giant Tesla coil in the middle of a room. I wish it was that cool. It actually doesn't look that cool. It does cool things, but it's more like a seed priming kind of system. So your seeds go into a system, it changes their electrical environment for a period of time, which changes how they grow for the lifetime of that seed.
And so, we've been talking collectively about, the way that your companies are making this shift from, I guess, imposing on nature, trying to control it, and now working with it to solve these problems that are really, only going to be exacerbated by some of the climate, environmental, aging population, all of these sorts of things. So, this is a paradigm shift in the way we do things. What I'm curious to know is whose minds, what mindset shift needs to happen? Whose minds do you need to change in order for you to be able to execute your visions the way that you're sharing with us today? Like, what do you see that challenge as being? And I'm opening that to any of you.
I think certainly in medtech, when you're trying to get people to adopt new technologies, it really is about awareness. So I implore all of you to do a free online hearing check through either the Hearing Australia website or the Ear Science Institute Perth, because knowledge is power, so understanding where you're at with your hearing loss. Obviously, we also have a lot of stakeholders, so Louis and I, it's not just the patient, the newborn that we're trying to treat and get them to adopt the technology. There's other stakeholders. And there's one stakeholder who plays a couple of roles, so being investors. Obviously we need to get to market to realise these technologies so we can change behaviours in the clinic. But there's also the payer, the insurer at the other end, who helps us to get this to the patient. And government plays both of those roles. So So I'm going to do a bit of a call to action, because at Hemedina we want to take this prototype and get it into clinical trials. So we need to then develop, into the commercial device, and that means we have to do some bespoke manufacturing. Our wireless coils, that's highly skilled manufacturing. Our electrode array, but all these things are things that will go into other implantable medical devices. So building that skills and capability here. Otherwise, we'll have to go offshore and use contract manufacturing. So there is precedent. The government invested a fair amount of money in Cochlear Limited. That has been a huge success story for returning that investment, jobs, skills. Australia actually is at 10% utilisation of cochlear implants, so that paid off. So we are requesting co-investment from the government to help us set up those manufacturing facilities so we can continue demonstrating Australia as the home of hearing innovation. We're a global leader in it. Let's maintain our position by developing new technologies and bring that adoption rate up.
Australia, the home of hearing innovation. You heard it here first, everybody. Louis, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, probably regulatory bodies need to actually be more fast in terms of approving these novel products and novel devices. Obviously, that's going to impact in the progress in R&D and also how long it takes to go to market. So by shortening it without compromising the quality of all the checks that needs to be done in order to guarantee that the product is right and the product is actually delivering what it is promising, will help innovation, because then there is going to be a return, faster, faster pathway to market, and it's going to help a lot in order to get these innovations, these new tech, to the final user, which is at the end of the day, what we all want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Alex and Mike, from you guys, whose minds do you need to change? Or will they be changed for us? We spoke a little bit about the regulatory changes that are coming in, say, Europe and places like that around the use of pesticides, herbicides. And what do you see as the challenge that you need to overcome in that space?
I think one of the biggest challenge for us, and I guess it's the same for Randstad, is at the end user is the growers. Mm-hmm. And using all the current like pesticide fertilizer, this is now known, but back 50, 60 years ago, it's also not known. And what we do now is when we tell people, sometimes it's like, well, what were you talking about? Why is this colored film change something? And I don't know about Mike, but I'm guessing like, why would lightning change something? And that's our own all collective knowledge that we need to educate ourselves, not just the user, but for us as well, because we need to know what is the impact of different colors to the different complexity of how the plants are reacting with lights. It's not going to be one size fits all. It's going to be targeted. So for us, we're going to make like a light recipe. Let's say a light recipe for tomatoes, a light recipe for capsicum, light recipe for lettuce is going to be different. They're not going to be one size fits all. And to reach there, we do need investment going in. We need to collectively, with the help of the different stakeholders, to understand all this different knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Mike?
Yeah, one of the challenges for us is regulatory challenges. But what we're finding is that early adopters are already out there trying stuff. Mm. They know these things are coming. They know these challenges are changing their way of producing, and they're desperate. They're looking for something that works. And we've found traction in being able to listen, and not just listen to what we're doing with the nature side of things, but also listen to the people, the farmers that come up to us and anecdotally say, oh yeah, I totally know about that. Like, we had this massive storm season, and with like all of the, whatever it is, like even those anecdotal things from all around the world that we're hearing, we learn from those things, and we look into new species. We understand, okay, well, that particular thing that grew in Guatemala, that's very interesting. That's got this similar characteristic to that thing, and we learn a lot from the anecdotal stories that are presented to us. Our challenge is similar to what Alex is saying, is like, we are going overseas because the urgency isn't here. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're setting up in Singapore. That's why we're doing things elsewhere. It's because we don't have to do a 4-year trial. We can be doing stuff now because it's urgent and because it's needed. And having that sense of let's do something now before it's a catastrophe is kind of what's needed. Like sure, we don't have the same level of scientific rigor that we would have in 10 years' time. But in 10 years' time, it's also too late. So can we start doing some trials now? Can we start using evidence as even if we don't understand every single one of the permutations, is the fact that it's working something that we can get behind and support?
So in 2011, Steve Jobs said, "I think the biggest innovations of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. A new era is beginning." So I want you, all of my panelists, to fast forward 10 years and assume, and we've sort of gone there just now, but assume your technologies and products have been adopted globally. What do your industries look like when that happens?
I'm going to throw that with one word: hope. Like, it seems like an impossible task. Things are too hard to reach up. Like, it's growing too fast. You can't keep up with it. You can't, in terms of regulatory changes, they're happening too quickly. Environmental changes are happening too quickly. How are you going to start a conversation with a plant or a fungi that's usually given millions of years to adapt to a change in an environment, and you've got to try and do it in 5 years, 10 years, whatever that might be. So I think it's hope. I think there's a sense of hope inside an industry to say we didn't even know there was this lever to pull. And I mean, it's not, it has been known. It's been known for 35,000 of years, and it's been somewhat overlooked by modern agriculture. And so having that lever to pull, I think, is the lever of hope.
The lever of hope. I love it. Alex, did you want to add to that?
I think Mick already said a lot of things. For us, if now we use the term things grow inside the structures like a greenhouse, and we don't even think anymore why it's a green. So we're hoping if it's not leaf house in 10 years, at least maybe red house or something like that.
That's good.
Liz, healthcare, if we can achieve what we know Hemodina can do, what's different? What's different in 10 years' time?
Yeah, so I talked about how hearing loss is linked to, untreated hearing loss linked to many diseases. So one of them is dementia. So there's about 250 of us in this room. That's how many Australians every day get diagnosed with dementia. And so hearing loss is actually the #1 modifiable risk for dementia. So if we got everyone getting adequate treatment for their hearing loss, being a hearing aid, a cochlear implant, by giving them better choices about what they can use to treat their hearing loss, we could prevent 20 people in this room from getting dementia every day in Australia. That's just Australia. The impact is huge. That's just one disease. Like, hearing has so many benefits for all of us, particularly as we get older and old age. We want people to live their fullest lives in retirement. We've worked bloody hard. You should be enjoying your retirement, and that's what we want to see as a future.
Yeah, so not just longevity, it's quality of life as well that we're improving through this. Yeah, Louis, you.
Well, in the case of the preterm babies, there is a 10% mortality rate right now. I hope for 0 mortality rate on our preterm babies, and not just by the innovation that we are creating, but also other countermeasures that are done by other companies. That I believe will be a pretty cool future to look. And in terms of innovation, I also hope for this trend on looking back to nature and rediscovering solutions, being the mindset of everyone who is doing innovation. It's a waste of knowledge that we are missing out just by trying to reinvent the wheel.
So this sounds like a future that I want to live in. And in the last 90 seconds, so I'm going to give you about 20 seconds each. We've got an amazing room of people here today from all different parts of the innovation ecosystem. What's your ask of them for the people in this room today? Mike?
We'd like trials in Australia in seeds, grains, even high-value foods like specific crops that don't germinate, that have challenges germinating or need very specific environments to germinate. We need some real trials here in Australia with people that have a lot to gain if it works.
Louis.
I would like to connect with people who are in the space of the regulatory bodies that are controlling these kind of products. That will be fantastic. I do love to connect with other researchers that are applying SynBio for their biotech companies, and whoever wants to support us and get us to that success faster, just feel free to reach me and have a conversation.
Liz, we're getting you a manufacturing facility, but what else can we do for Hemedina?
Well, as part of the manufacturing facility, there is an R&D grant, infrastructure grant open in Victoria. I know we're not in Victoria, so apologies, but what we're looking for is partners in Victoria who have the capability to expand their infrastructure under this grant, and we could co-design our manufacturing facilities with them and open it up to other startups too, not just Hemedina.
Regulatories, because we want to put this into buildings in greenhouse in Australia, and to do that we need to build facilities, so regulators and investment.
Well, everybody, we're at time. Can we please say thank you to our 4 incredible panelists for what was a very inspiring discussion. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to our amazing panel. I was so inspired by what you had to say that I've asked my friend ChatGPT to do a little limerick for you. In the morning, the sun shines so bright, while lightning dances with all its might. In